Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day, night, or time space continuum it is where you are. Hello and welcome to another episode of Witchy Wednesday with the Meandering Magical Podcast. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Neil.
And today we are going to be telling you all why other witchy folk would consider us to be magical heretics. I love it. I just love it every time. I love it. Love it. I love our intro music. So then, Neil, this was your idea for a podcast. So then, first of all, I guess, what do we mean by magical heretics?
Okay, so when people think of witches, like if you say, oh, I'm a witch, and then people kind of have this idea of what a witch is and what a witch does, like witch is someone who does like magic every day and rituals every day. They honor the deities, they make sure they know what, the planetary phases are and do divination every day. And people have this idea of what witches do. So basically, if you don't do all of those things every day, maybe you don't even do any of them one day, would you still feel like you're a practicing witch? But yeah, just in general, like that's the idea of witchcraft and what witches do.
So for me, it's that thing of what would make me a heretic, or how I would be seen as heretical, would be this idea. By the way, thanks for teaching me that, because I've never been able to say that word. I always stumble over it. But what would make me a heresy, or what would make me a heretic within the witchcraft sort of world, the wider sort of craft world, I guess would be the fact that I don't follow the rules that have been laid down by various people in various ways, whether it be in books, in videos, in sort of, actual going to coven meetings and being told you must practice this in this way. It's all of those rules and things that for me, it's not that I break the rules, it's just that for me, I don't follow that path. So I don't feel the need to tick those boxes and dot those I's and cross those T's. It's not for me. So a lot of people that do practice that would look at me and go, but you're not a proper witch. Like, one of the things that we were trying to, revealing the behind the scenes information here, one of the things when we were trying to work out what we were going to call this was, are we bad witches? Are we lazy witches? Because there's that thing of, I don't practice every Sabbat. I barely even know where the sort of moon is in Mars or Mercury's in retrograde. The only reason I know anything about Mercury retrograde, in all honesty, is because of Instagram. Because every time somebody goes, that's it now, Mercury's out of retrograde until April the 27th, and I go, oh, that's interesting. Oh no, now Mercury's in retrograde and Pluto's like going the right way, but now Mars is in, and I'm like, I don't know what any of that is supposed to mean. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information. Like, okay, because I am damn sure before we had telescopes that were able to look at what Neptune is doing or what Pluto is doing. I know Pluto's not technically a planet now, but you know what I mean? Before you had a telescope able to look at that, you wouldn't have a bloody idea whether a planet was going this way or that way, or, playing snooker with itself, because you couldn't see it. So how has that now become such a big thing that we blame, the reason that you lost that job is because Mercury was in retrograde. It's not because you spent all your time in your lunch hour down the pub necking 15 vodkas, coming back in stinking like a brewery and telling your boss to go F himself. It wasn't anything to do with that. It's because Mercury was in retrograde. So I'm on my high horse now, but basically, it's that thing of like assuming that just because I am a witch, that I must know everything astrological. I must know everything about moon phases. I know when it is a full moon, because I actually feel that. There's like I get this really weird, the 3 days of the full moon, it's almost that werewolfy, Oz in Buffy thing where you kind of get this all, and I can feel the energy changing. And I sometimes get that on a new moon. They're the only two that I have any kind of concept of. Everything else, I still couldn't tell you what a waxing gibbous is. I was like, waxing gibbon? Is that what you like? Isn't that wrong if you take an ape and you put like wax strips on it and you peel it off his leg? That's just not right. You shouldn't do that to a gibbon. No, waxing gibbous. It's a whole thing about, it's like, okay, yeah, that's nice. Because in my practice, I've never needed to know that. And it's not been something that I've based my craft around. And I think that's what we're really talking about, isn't it? It's that this idea that because you're a witch, you must do all of these practices every single time you need to do a working or a spell casting, and you must honor the god, the goddess, every Sabbat, every full moon, every quarter.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, that's kind of how I would sort of be termed a heretic. We're going to go into it in a lot more detail, obviously. There are certain things that I do that have come from following some rules, and there are other things that I do that I've never followed those rules. So what about you then? So what would make you, how are you heretical?
I think yay. I think the main thing for me is that well, years and years and years ago, I would class myself as pagan, and that was always the thing that put down, you know, the statey religion. And when I got into chaos magic, you know, I'm still doing all the pagan stuff, still honoring all the sabbats, and you know, I'll just kind of taking note of that's going on planetary wise. Things are a certain way. And I realized that it kind of just didn't do anything for me. And even when I was kind of trying to, oh, well, I suppose I should do this because it's the new moon. And I didn't get anything out of it. And I thought, well, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not believing it, then it's not going to work. And then I kind of got to this realization where I went, I'm not actually pagan. And for other witches, when I told them that, they were like, so you're a witch, but you're not pagan. And it's like, for them, it's like the two go hand in hand. And I think that's been a kind of thing with me, is thinking that people do assume that if you're a witch, you're out, you know, in tune with all nature and what's going on, and, you know, observing the seasons and everything. Whereas with me, it's never done anything for me, and it's never worked for me because I've never really had that interest. So for me, that's probably like the biggest thing, is I'm not pagan. So yeah, so I mean, it's just all down to, if you're not into something, if you magically, you know, it doesn't work for you, like, if you're not interested, then why bother doing it? You know, why should you feel like, oh, well, this is what witches do? It's like, there's no fun in it. You know, who are you doing it for? If it's not gonna work for you, it's kind of like, if you're not Christian, you go to church and you pray, it's not going to work. So I feel like it's in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've literally just had a little light bulb moment just went off in my head, literally right now, where I'm now thinking, am I pagan? Because again, I've said that many times. Am I pagan? I'm definitely a witch, and I definitely have pagan elements. I do have connections to some deity, but not like, it's a really, that's really just my brain's gonna have to, I'm gonna have to like cogitate on this. No, it's that, do you know what it is? It's that Granny Weatherwax thing. When Granny Weatherwax in the Terry Pratchett books, when like she disdains people who believe in and worship the gods, because she's like, well, of course I know they're real, but it doesn't mean I have to go around worshipping them. And it's that attitude. It's like, yeah, well, you exist doing your stuff and I exist over here doing mine. And like, I acknowledge your existence, but I'm not about to go and, you know, offer you a libation and all of that, unless I am particularly wanting you to do something for me. But as we talked about on previous podcasts, like I obviously came into witchcraft through rebelling against Christianity and the Sunday school thing, then coming in via the Wiccan door, and then realizing very firmly that I was basically then swapping out one book of rules for a different book of rules, except this book was written by, you know, men, however many hundreds of thousands or a couple of thousand years ago, if not quite that long, but you know what I mean. And this other book was written by largely men in the 70s, but both of them, like, why am I following either of these books? Like, yeah, okay, let's just go my own way. You can go your own way. But then it was kind of then, oh, well, I'm pagan because it's a nice umbrella term. But then actually, what about my actual practice these days is pagan? You know what I mean? It's like, so that's interesting. But I have to put a pin in that because that's a whole, we'll have to do a whole podcast on, you know, what post-paganism is, and all of that. But anyway, but I do think a lot of people in the more organized parts of the sort of pagan umbrella would look at us as both being bad witches or bad magicians, bad practitioners, because neither of us particularly do the things. Like, we don't do the things that people say you have to do to be a practitioner.
I mean, it's like how we talked about it in the last episode. Like, I don't have any magical tools, and I also don't have an altar either, which would, you know, most witches would be like, you can't call yourself a witch. You don't have an altar. You don't have these tools. You don't celebrate the Sabbaths. You don't write in a book of shadows. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, I've been doing shit for like whatever years. Things have worked for me. I'm perfectly happy in doing them, and I'm not about to start feeling the peer pressure from other witches to like, oh shit, I better like get my shit together and start doing this. Yeah, it's like anything else as well. It's like, just because, you know, our witches are into herbs, crystals, all that, it's like, well, I'm not going to start picking stuff up that I've not been interested in, because I know I'm going to, you know, bouncing to another thing is like ceremonial stuff. Like, you know, myself and a few other chaos magicians that I know, they know that if they put on all the garb and the tools in the smoky room and do all the chanting, they're going to be there going, they're going to, they can't get into it. So how is it going to work if it's not you? It's not your kind of magic. So I think just in general, if it's not for you, you don't have to do it. So, but I guess we're kind of like straw manning really, is like most witches would see that as like, well, what the fuck do you do that classifies you as a witch? So yeah, I mean, so for instance, when was the last time that you would say that you've done a magical act?
I can actually answer that. It was, what are we now, 23 minutes in, so it was probably 27 minutes ago when I breathed some life into a working that I have on my new altar space. By the way, let me just show everybody, I have changed the layout of everything. I've now got this new bookcase with my tarot cards on and everything, so it's all lovely. But I do have an altar space. It's not really an altar in the way that a lot of witches would call it an altar. It's literally I've just got to say it. It's a dumping ground for magical shit. That's what it is. It is a dumping ground for magical shit. The workings that I am doing, and like, because there's a jar just back here somewhere, and like the workings that I'm doing that are active, they go there because it's a convenient place for them to be, and they are around other magical accoutrement. So if there is a working that's bubbling, then I don't mean like, but I mean like if there's something that is ticking over, then of course I'm going to try and put it near other things that are also ticking over, partly because, as we talked about in the last episode, like if I'm going to be lighting candles and incense and things, I don't want that on every single surface. I don't have a lot of surfaces in this room, but I don't want all of them covered in ash. So if I can keep it to like one area, that makes sense. And literally with my magical tools and things that are on the thing here, like that was set up for Samhain, which is one of the only sort of Sabbats that I've ever really strongly connected with. And it isn't the Samhain element, it is the proper like chintzy, cheesy Halloween mixed in with Day of the Dead and, you know, Dia de los Muertos and the traditions from that, but also going back into just the idea of honoring the ancestors and the veil thinning. So all of those things combined have kind of, it's become my own version of Samhain. But that was set up for that. And then because of its, I love the dichotomy of the light and the dark, which as a liminal witch, I just, that to me, like, ask me what my witchcraft is. There it is. There are two skulls, like cheap, cheerful, like ceramic skulls, one from TK Maxx and one from probably Poundland, I don't know. 2 cheap skulls, one black, one actually one white, and then one is actually a dark navy sort of galaxy, which is my thing. And then, you know, one was a hand lotion bottle that you were supposed to put your hand lotion in, and I took the lid off that, threw it away, and I just put some feathers in it. And then next to that is the wand from Willow and the athame from Wayne, both have passed over, and an obelisk which represents my father's energy, and in front of that is a little butterfly that represents my mother's energy. So that is my permanent space to remember like those closest to me that have passed. And so technically that's an altar. And I guess this, hang on, which way is it? There we go. This one here, this statuette that I've got here, technically is a statue of a goddess, but that is all goddesses. That is the epitome of energy. And because I don't believe, and you've got to honor the god and the goddess separately, because I don't acknowledge that gender binary bullshit stuff, for me, it's all one energy. Like, it's just energy. The energy of the universe doesn't have a gender, and it has all genders simultaneously. So therefore that statue, yes, it's the sort of the feminine energy, but that could just as easily be stood there for a god, or it could just as easily be stood there for anything that I'm working with, any kind of energy form, any kind of, you know, we've talked about my dragons originally starting off as sort of egregore servitor type things, which is for a whole other podcast, but that could represent working with anything. Like with that energy, it's just the personification or the visual representation of a personification of energy. And so whilst you look at it and you might go, oh yeah, well, she's got a goddess there and there's skulls there, that's obviously for the ancestors, and even on this side, you know, there's cauldrons and crystals and all sorts of other bits and pieces. The reality is it's just where I store my magical stuff that is either in use or stuff that I know if I need a crystal, because I'm working on this 100 days of divination, which I'll talk about in a bit. But if I need a crystal, or if I need a pendulum, that's where they live.
Yeah,
because it's also like being kept charging, because I used to work with crystals, so it is being kept charging with that energy. So that's literally what my altar is. But how is that any different to somebody else's altar where they are paying worship to a deity? For me, it's a working space, and I think that's the difference. I am a very practical witch, a very practical practitioner. Like, why I get doing the bells and whistles, I get putting all of the paraphernalia on and doing that on very specific occasions, but equally there is a part of me putting on my robe and standing out, you know, doing a dawn ritual to welcome in the midsummer sun. I love it, but there is a little part of me that's like, what if the neighbors see? And I don't actually care, because the neighbors can go F themselves, but you know what I mean? But there is still that part of me that's like, oh, I feel a bit silly, because it is like you're really stepping out of your normal kind of space, which is the whole point of wearing that. But it's just because, you know, in the wider world, you go, oh, does she think she's a witch now? Does she? You know what I mean? And it's that, I think there's a lot of adverse peer pressure around it as well in the normal mundane world, the muggle world. But there is in the mundane world, there is a lot of expectation. Oh, you're a witch, you must be evil, you must be doing this, you must be doing that. So I guess that's a little bit about how I would consider myself, or how others would consider me to be a heretic within sort of my version of the craft. But obviously you're a chaos magician, so how is any chaos magician ever seen? I mean, are chaos magicians ever seen as heretics? Like, how can you be a heretical chaos magician? Because surely the whole idea is chaotic. So how does that work?
Yeah, because I mean, in general, witches kind of see chaos magicians as the taking the piss, lazy form of magic, you know, because it's all about shortcuts, but, you know, finding ways to be very effective. I suppose it's because I always bring out the IoT, you know, I'm not name dropping them all the time, but it's just to make a point. But with the IoT, I would have to do exercises every day, you know, different form of exercises, meditations, dream work, come up with my own systems, blah, blah, blah. Go to covens twice a week, all that. So that's, I'd be like, that's hardcore. Yeah, that's being a witch, right? But then it kind
I
of got to
didn't even do that when I was looking at joining a Gardnerian coven, for God's sake. Wow. Okay.
also, you know, keeping a book of shadows every day. You know, it was a lot of work, and it just got to the point where I was like, there's too much order in this chaos. Like,
yeah,
there's too much order, and that's one of the reasons why I left, because to me, magic shouldn't feel like hard work, and you shouldn't be doing things that don't feel like you kind of have a connection with, or I mean, chaos magic, it's all about having fun with it as well. So if you're not having fun, then what's the point in doing it? So, you know, I mean, I don't know that many, not really any chaos magicians, but the ones that I do know also kind of struggle with this idea of, am I doing enough? Because chaos magicians, well, chaos magic is quite do your own thing, do it your own way. So you're open to set your own standards, really. But still, you have that thing sometimes with chaos magicians where they're like, am I doing enough? I feel like I should be doing more. I feel like I should, you know, have much more regular practice. But, you know, I mean, with me, I just do it when I feel like I'm in a really good headspace and it's something that I really want to do. And but yeah, it's like I don't keep a book of shadows. I don't do things every day. You know, the last time I did something was a few days ago. And the thing is, I did something a few days ago, and that was probably after, God, weeks, months maybe of doing anything. And it's the thing is, I really, really wanted to do it, and I did it, and I got results like straight away. And that to me is, well, it's almost like the quality rather than the quantity of magic that you're doing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you know, I'd rather be doing that than just kind of like willy-nilly just sigils every day and going, oh, I suppose, oh, maybe some of these will work. Like, what's the point in doing it if you're not going to get in that, this is magic, I'm going to do it and it's going to work? You know, I don't feel like you can be in that headspace every day to do magic.
We both sort of said that for us, we haven't got that need. But I also remember conversations going way back when there was that need for us because we were learning. So I think it all depends on where you are within your practice. I don't know what you think about that, because obviously when you are a beginner, and we will talk about shortcuts in a second because you brought shortcuts up. I've got a few things to sort of say about that as well. When have I never got a few things to say about a subject? You know what I mean? But like, in all honesty, I think when you are starting out, it's a bit like muscle memory. It's like, you know, you can be the world's, you know, best athlete when you're 30 or 20, 28, whatever it is. But the only way you're going to do that is if you put in those hours and days and weeks and months and years of practice and hardcore training to get you to the point where, you know, you can just go and run a sprint or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Because you've got that muscle memory, you know what you're doing, it becomes second nature. And I think for me, my witchcraft, I had to go through those early stages and those Wiccan stages of kind of going, right, I know how to cast a circle, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. What's beyond this? And for a lot of people, they don't want to move beyond those constructs. Whereas for me, it was always, okay, this is interesting. When do we get to the good stuff? So what about, you know, what's your thoughts on, like, for people coming into the craft, or when you were starting off, like, did you do a lot more regular? I mean, obviously for the time that you were with the IOU PQRST, that I can never remember what it is. It's three initials, and every single time my brain goes nip, because I want to say YMCA and I know it isn't. But like, for the time that you were with them, obviously you had to put that practice in. Do you feel that that was kind of like building up that magical muscle memory?
Yeah, I think it was good in a way because, well, yeah, I learned a lot. And I decided, no thanks. I had to I had to try it. I had to go through all these things and see and be like, no, I'm not into that, or I like that, but if I was going to do it, I'd change this. And I think, yeah, I think you do have to have a bit of training, I think. And when you're starting out, you got to have a bit of basics, try everything out, see if it's good for you, and till you get to the point where you're like, nah, this is, yeah, like with the IoT, I just got to a point where I was like, there's a lot here to go through every day, every time. And I think as you get older and you get more experienced, you can start honing those things down so you're not doing something all day. Because that's another thing, is that, you know, doing magic, you can't necessarily do things every day because life gets in the way. And that can be either work, it could be health, it could be anything. So I think, yeah, relationships, hobbies, or other things that you like to do, you shouldn't have to push aside or try and make time for magic if you don't feel like you want to do it. So I think there's a big thing in you balancing out these things. You can't possibly do stuff every day. With chaos magicians, chaos magic, it's all about finding your own way of doing things anyway. And to go through all these different tried and tested, widely used practices, it's just more of a suggestion, like, we'll do this, but how, if you had written this, what would you have done a bit different? And also it's things like, when I've done things that are a bit more, got more detail to them, and say if I have been pushed for time or energy or anything, or supplies that I'm using, I've been like, let's try it without this, let's try it, let's skip that. And then when stuff's worked, I'm like, okay, right, don't need to do that. So it's almost like with each time practicing, it's almost like editing it. So you just hone it. So it is good to go through the basics and learn them and get them to work, and then you get them working, and you're like, all right, okay, let's change it a bit, and then change a bit. Oh, it still works. All right, you know, until you get to something that sits better with you, you know, rather than going like, oh yeah, you know, and boring yourself if you're not, if it doesn't really click with you anyway. So yeah,
I guess it's like any creative craft. I guess like with painting and artwork or anything like that, you've got to kind of know the rules in order to break them. So, you know, look at Picasso. Picasso's artwork is amazing, but it's a little bit different. Look at, you know, there's many artists out there who understand form and light and shadow and perspective and all of that. And they'll use that understanding that they've spent years honing that skill to then break what your expectation is, because they then break those rules, but they do it in a way where they're using those rules to break those rules, if that makes sense. And I think what you're describing in terms of like, oh, I need all of these things. Oh, but I haven't got that. Okay, well, let's just take it out. Does it still work? Yes, it does. Right. So I didn't really need that then. Well, what about, I don't have this either. So, oh, well, we're out of that. It's a bit like with candle magic. Like, does it really matter the color of the candle you're using? Is it more important the flame and the intention? Be in my bonnet time. When we're talking about magical correspondences, right? You read a book. This book says, green means money. And I go, does it? Why? Oh, because in America, all money is green. Right, but I'm not in America. And like my green money is the lowest denomination. Why can't money be red for me? Because that's 50s, not fivers. Or why can't it be gold? Like, why is money green? And then you go, oh, this book is written in India and this says money is, and you go, but hang on a second. If these magical correspondences that we are taught we must absolutely use, if they can vary depending on the cultural significance of the color of money in those areas, then does it really matter anyway? Is it like, how does that work? You know what I mean? It's like, huh?
Because it's
all
like
those correspondences. I've always just gone, really?
I think it's like we were saying, like about getting the basic training under your belt. So meditation and visualization and things. And so when you get to say candle magic and you're told, all right, you need a red candle for whatever. What's the red candle for? See how great I am at witchcraft?
It can be for lust. It can be for traditionally it's used in magic, but it's also used in anger workings. If you want to, sometimes use that sort of red hot, fiery anger energy at people. But...
So yeah, say if you need a red candle and you've got a red candle, but so if you're a beginner and you're like, well, I must get a red candle because that's what it says. So when you begin and you're like, right, I've got to get a red candle. But then when you've been going through these basic practices of visualization and meditation, etc., then when you found a green candle in your cupboard, and you're like, well, I've honed this craft of being able to visualize things better. So when I'm looking at this candle, I'm just going to imagine that it's a red candle.
It's a red candle, yeah.
So that's where the basic stuff is good for, stuff like
absolutely.
That. I think in general, it's all just about honing and changing and adapting things away from the original way that it's done. Like, for instance, with chaos magic, there is some kind of accepted staples in chaos magic. I mean, especially like sigils and stuff. In general, chaos magic is very modern, so I mean that's why people kind of have issues with it seen as not legit. But there's a recent book that I read by Gordon White, who wrote Chaos Protocols, and he came up with this, I think it was him that came up with it, this method of casting sigils, and that's like only a few years old, and people are using it, chaos magicians are using it and then adapting it. So I think with chaos magic it's so modern, and there's staples being found all the time. But I mean, this is a perfect example of my laziness when it comes to witchcraft. Is I tend to do the shoaling method quite a bit. I mean, basically the shoaling method is you create a lot of sigils at the same time for different things. And so you've just got like bits of paper or whatever with each of these sigils on. You mix them up, you forget about them. And then, give them a few weeks or so, and then you get them. And I tend to carry them around in either like a pot or like a purse. And whenever I find an opportunity to cast one, I'll pick it out and I'm like, I have no idea what this is for. So this is perfect. So this is buried in my subconscious already. So over time, I'll find these opportunities and I'll cast these sigils. Might take a few weeks or so. But this is the lazy thing, is that quite recently I was rooting through stuff, and then I found this pot and I was like, oh shit. And I felt the weight of it, and I opened it and went, oh my God. And it was full of sigils that I'd not cast. And I had no idea how old these sigils were. And I just kind of went, oh, I'll deal with them later. Right. Which is terrible, that's bad and lazy, right? But, again, it's this thing of, well, okay, how can I problem solve this? And this is why I kind of like this bit of laziness, really, is it gives you an opportunity how to work stuff out. So then I basically had to come up with an idea where I could cast all these sigils all at once. And it took some scheming over days to work it out. And I thought, if you would have just fucking cast these sigils, you would have saved all these days trying to work out how to do it. I mean, I could have been worse though. I could have just gone bin, But the thing is, like, I did it and I came up with this method, and it's not a method that I could find online, because instantly I went, how can I cast sigils all at the same time online? Because I'm that fucking lazy. And it's a method that I came up with, I didn't find, and it worked and it all went fine. So yeah, it's all these laid out methods in books. You can try them and then adapt to them, and you might find yourself in some pickles like that if you're bloody lazy.
Yeah.
But you can always work your way around them, and I think that's why I kind of like Chaos Magic, is that it's almost like a creative, fun. How can I get around this kind of magic?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting. No, I think that is really, really fascinating, because it's again, it's you coming up with your own way. And the thing is, right, one thing I've never really understood is why we put so much stock in other people's books. Like, who is to say that, okay, randomly, it would be randomly Eileen Connolly, who, you know, made the tarot deck that I have connected with for 18 years now. But like, who is to say that this is the definitive and the only way of using tarot? I bet you, and when I do my 100 days of divination, which I will get to talking about in a minute, but when I do that, I bet if I went to, you know, go through this book, there would be many things in here that I disagree with, many definitions that I go, really? And that I just kind of, you know, are very, very different to me, even though she created the deck that I absolutely adore. And, you know, you could sit down and write a book and create a whole system based on your casting sigils all at once method. And you could, you know, get it published, and then people would be following your technique. Somebody somewhere has to come up with all of the books. So every single book out there that we hold dear, that we hold holy or sacred or whatever, every single one of those has been created. There was a time when it existed in somebody's brain and in somebody's imagination, and they've gone, maybe if I draw a star and it's got 7 points, that's a lot, maybe 6 points, oh no, that's the Star of David, maybe 5 points, okay, we'll do 5 points then, and then those 5 points, what can it mean? Oh, the elements are earth, air, fire, water. Oh shit, that's only 4, but a 4-pointed star, that's a square. How do I, you know what I mean? Somebody somewhere had to then come up with, why is it a 5-pointed star? And whether that person was, you know, ye olde, I don't know, you know, bloke who also was dragging the stones for Stonehenge, or whether that person was, you know, Mr. Gerald Gardner in 1963 or whenever the hell it was, really doesn't matter. It's, you know, the fact that something is put out there and we now all agree that this is the done way. But before that was the done way, there was another way. And after that's the done way, there's going to be another way. And that's just the way of nature, the way of magic, the way of the universe. So there's like, this is when people say, oh, you must read this book. And what are the must read books? Whatever you want. One thing that has stuck with me, Neil, since our first podcast episode, right? When you said, if you want to do a justice working, why not use Batman? And my brain went, it was like, right. So, and what happens is that my brain goes, right, so Batman is actually the archetype. So if we're looking at Jung's archetypal theory, then Batman is the judge, jury, and executioner. So actually that works really well. But Batman has this ethical element, so not necessarily leading all the way up to death. However, early Batman did. So which point of Batman do we use? And then the Dark Knight, you go, oh, this is really interesting. And that idea of using pop culture references, but how your knowledge of understanding of them is exactly what people would have gone in the oral traditions, when people would have said, and then there was this god, and he did set upon the earth a great plague. Or they would go, yes, and the reason that your love life is failing is because you didn't give an offering to Aphrodite, because you know she's the beautiful one, everyone's jealous of her. And they told the same stories, and it was that same myth creation which came from, that started off as a story and ended up becoming deities and items of worship. So like, there is no difference in my head to you doing the working and using the personification, the idea, the archetypal imagery of Batman, and in that personification, then somebody else going, like me, going, oh, actually, I'm going to use the Justice and the Judgment cards in the tarot deck, and maybe to get a little bit of karmic retribution, maybe I'll bring in, like, oh, I don't know, the devil, or maybe I'll bring, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
it's the same. And
Have I got a book for you that I've just finished?
Is it Batman the early years? Because I love it. Oh, what's this? Pop culture magic system. Oh, well, there you go. You see, yeah, literally what I just said. That looks really interesting.
Taylor Elwood is a fantastic writer. He basically does a lot of stuff to do with pop culture magic, because the way he writes is he doesn't tell you what to do. He just says, come up with an idea. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Maybe you should think about this. And it's all about inspiring you to craft things yourself. He just tends to kind of, he's more, it gives you a lot of things to think about, like, rather than just an author saying, this is what I do and you should do this. It's more, you know, so with this, it's just, well, basically how to come up with like a magical system based on some pop culture that you like, and it's got experiences of other magicians and what they've come up with. There's a whole chapter on a woman who's created a magical system based on Doctor Who, and the things that she had to think about, and the way that she's crafted how she honors him and how she gets just shit done. And they're really, really good.
There's a couple of things that I wrote down as you were talking, actually. Well, there's one main thing, and it's this concept of, in terms of magical practice, is it something you do or someone you are? And I think that's a really important distinction. And I remember, like 100 years ago, having this conversation with Wayne, because I had reached the point of asking myself that question, found the answer that meant something to me, and was able to then ask Wayne, and it stopped him in his tracks, and he was like, oh, and it's literally, for me, what that question means is it something you do? So are you a practicing witch because you perform witchcraft things? So is it something that you do? You wake up in the morning and you go, today I am going to do a ritual, and I'm going to prepare my herbs, and I'm going to prepare my, so you put all of that in. Or is it something you are? So is it something that every single thing you do, from the minute you open your eyes to the minute you close your eyes again, is coloured or impacted by your practice? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that it's just who I am, because I think previously I used to say I would definitely fit the category of it's something I do, because it was all about, I have to do this. All part of my training, I've got to do this is what I do. I get up, it's almost like studying. And I think it's just who I am. And so there could be little things that I do that do have some intent behind it. I don't think about it. I don't really make it overly important if I do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Because before, it was all about putting too much emphasis on, like, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it a magical way, or I've got to have a magical reason for this, you know. And I think if you kind of live your life doing too much and putting too much intent into everything that you do, I think you're not kind of living in the real world. You're not kind of balancing your magical and mundane life. So I think for me, it's just someone who I am, and I naturally fall into these things that I do. It's very casual and very natural to me. It's not something that I feel like I have to put things on pause in my life to do things, you know, because it used to be like that before. But I think, it's just all about finding the right balance, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, again, comes back to this idea about shortcuts in magic. because we've spoken a little bit, touched on it a little bit, but I use shortcuts. Like I used to, like, again, in my boss, I have the full LBP, lesser banishing of the pentagram, lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, including, the Kabbalistic cross, the middle pillar, all of that. And I would go through all of these steps to establish that I was in a magical space. And I know why it was necessary, because again, it was learning that feeling, learning what it is like to put my energy to a certain point, to cast it in a certain way, to have a connection of a certain value, if you like. But over the years, that has become pretty much waving my hand in the air like you just don't care. No, but waving my hand in the air to create a pentagram, and then moving it around all four sides of me, and immediately visualizing that is at that point of, now I've done the full-on several minute, like 15, 20, 30-minute long rituals to get to that same point. And I can do it like that. And it's in an emergency situation, if I need to do some sort of working because there is an emergency situation, and I just want to have that extra element of having a circle cast for protection or whatever it is that I need to do, I will go into it instantly, and it will be just as strong, if not stronger, than I used to have that same connection of literally putting on the robe, getting everything out, making sure everything is lining up with the, north, south, east, west correspondences and everything else. And I would go through that entire process to get me to the same point that now I can get to in seconds. And it used to take a good half an hour. And that was before you even do any part of the ritual. And so for me, those sort of shortcuts, and there's loads of them, there's loads of shortcuts that I've acquired over the years, and it's acquired through that experience. So like, do you have, I know you said that you've got some sort of shortcut. So like, how does that work for you? Is that a similar sort of thing where you kind of go, bonk?
There is loads of shortcuts that I use, but I can't really think of any off the top of my head because they're just so natural to me, or they're a bit too hush hush. But for instance, I'm not a very ceremonial person, and when I've wanted to work in a certain way that is something quite seen as ancient, and I've read all there is to know about something that is quite traditional, and the wording is very, it's not great, and it involves a lot of drawing things on the floor and getting into the right headspace, and it's all very serious, and that's not me. I'd feel like a right fucking fanny doing that. So it's just thinking, well, okay, well, if I knock that bit off, I'll try something similar. Oh yeah, that kind of works, right? Okay, well, I'll knock that bit off as well. Oh, it still works, and it's just deconstructing it and going, oh right, it's just about this. And thinking, well, okay, so that headspace that I had here when I was doing the full thing, how do I make that headspace? So say like way back when starting to do this type of magic, oh well, to get myself in the headspace, I'd put on this song. So then you're like, okay, right.
Yep.
So you put on that song, so many steps down the line where you've come to a basic stripped down version, you put that song on, and you're like, right, well, I'm in that headspace. So for me, it's a lot of other sensory things, especially music. It's I can put music on, I can then get into a certain state. If you say, for instance, you want to feel like something is quite scary or very serious, or so you just put the right thing. I put the right type of music on, sit in the dark, try and get really fucking freaked out, just kind of create that heightened sense of awareness, and that's my way of doing it. And then I do this practice and it works. So then it's like, all right. So for me, it's just all about just stripping things, right? Going, do I need that? No. Do I need that? Well, maybe I do need that. Well, what about that? Kick that off. So I do tend to do that, where I try and strip things down. And even now when I'm doing rituals, I'm still trying to strip them down, because I don't see the need. Because if you're in that mindset, you know, if you can get into that headspace and you feel like this will work, this is serious, this is important, then yeah, I think it's almost like when you were talking, I was thinking instantly, my mind went to, it's like those people who can just do magic eyes, right? Versus
Yes.
some people have to really like, you know, some people just can't do it, and some people just have to really work at trying to do it, and sometimes they have to really strain, and oh no, it's gone. And with me, it took me like years to get a magic eye. I just couldn't quite get it. And then one day I was like, oh, got it. And now I can look at a magic eye and go, right, yeah, it's dolphin. Like, it's that kind of thing where you can just, you know what to do with your eyes, and you're like, you know, so it's kind of like similar in that way, where you can just get instantly in the space where you know things will work magically.
See, I do something like that on a Sunday evening when I'm doing my tarot readings. Like I now have a little magical bell, and so I'll ring the bell. And if anybody's ever watched the live streams or watched them on replay or something, you'll see that I started doing that fairly recently. Like at the beginning of the podcast, I didn't do that. At the beginning of the sort of live streams, I didn't do that. And the reason was that before using a bell and using sound as a way of like cleansing, or just creating a space and allowing the guides, the energies that I work with to come through, before doing that, I would still kind of cast a circle and kind of go through that process. And then it was a thing of like, one of the days, I think I was literally like, shit, I need to be live now. I can't cast. Like, I'm already 2 minutes late, because you know me, I'm late for everything. Like, oh my god, I should have hit like broadcast now. I should be live now. Jesus, right? Okay, what are we going to do? Right? Okay, listen, dragons, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to ring this bell. That signifies that I am cleansing the space. Any negative energy that's here, if you try and fuck with me for this next 2 hours while I'm live on the YouTubes, all the dragons are going to come after you, followed by me, like doing the WandaVision thing of like chucking energy everywhere. Like, don't do it. And I was like, okay, dragons, this is what we're doing. This bell signifies that. And it was almost like as soon as I rung the bell, and I literally said that in this room, in this space where like there's lots of energies normally that buzz around in this space. It was literally like everything just went, okay, right, we're just gonna I'll just be over here. Oh yeah, yeah, okay, we're gonna go and grab a coffee, see you in a bit, bye. And it was literally like, whoop. And
yeah, it's the intention.
It was that, yeah, it was the intention. And so now I shortcut all of that. I don't even need to say, because I just go, and it's that thing, like my intention is there, that connection is there. It immediately shortcuts to that point.
For me, one of the things, you know, one of the pressures that I put on myself, you know, to be more magical is I like to read more books, you know. I mean, I'm into books in general, but
can never tell looking at your background.
Oh, there's only a few here.
But these pesky books.
They go up and they go down as well. But you know, I like to think that, well, you know, to you know, get ideas and get inspired and learn more stuff, you know, magical stuff. Oh, well, I've got all these books and, you know, I should be reading them. I should always have one on the go. And it's like, no, I'd rather just read some absolute shit instead. So I'll be like, right, I'll get them right. These magical, oh, they sound really interesting. Oh yeah, they'll be good. I put them by by my chair, and then I'm like, oh, this Dexter book. I feel like this let's just look at it. Oh yeah. And then I just read that. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, oh, but I want to read the next Dexter book. Oh, I'm in the mood to read something even worse than this. Oh, okay, right. And it's just, they're just there. And it's like, well, what is wrong with you, you lazy fucking wizard?
Do you know what it is? I've got the Konstantinos books. I've got 2 of those to read, like properly. I've got a few other books that I've got on the go. And I've got another couple coming. Fabulous. I would much rather just sit and watch YouTube, to be honest, because my brain hurts and I've got to put my dark glasses on because the lights hurt my eyes. And so if I'm reading, I'm now reading through like twilight specs. So everything's like a little bit darker, which is fine during the daytime, but at nighttime when I'm just trying to flick through a book for pleasure, it makes it a bit more difficult. So I need to put a light on, and then I've got to be, I can't be asked. So I've got to, with books, I've got to physically be like, make yourself sit down. You are going to spend an hour reading this book. But yeah, one of the things I was going to say about like laziness in general, it's a bit like the shortcut thing, because we were talking about like if a witch wants a particular money powder, for instance, right? Which actually I should put those on the shop. Why have I not done that? That's ridiculous. I've made my own money powder for years, never ever been rich, but always had enough to get by. Like, and that's kind of like, you know, a witch always has enough, never too much, but enough. And so for me, like, I make a money powder, but I don't make it in like a tiny amount. Oh, I'm going to do a ritual today, so I make a tiny little bit. I make a whopping great big jar full, because then I know that that sits in my cabinet, and then I go, oh right, okay, I need some money powder for something. Oh, I'll just take a pinch of that out, and then when it gets to like this far down in the jar, I'll make a whole different batch, and it might be the same ingredients, or it might be a slightly different concoction because I haven't got all of those in at the time, but it always does what it needs to do. But that laziness for me is in that, you know, making a big enough batch that I probably don't need to make it for another year or two. And it's that same thing. And so again, a lot of people will be, oh no, for every ritual you've got to start from scratch. And it's like, why? Like, because the idea is you've got it on hand. So yeah, you worked your ass off to make your giant pot of whatever powder, but then you put it in your cupboard and use it when you need it.
Well, yeah, because you got to be practical in your life. You've got other stuff to do in your life. You can't just be going to the graveyard every day and picking up some graveyard dirt or whatever.
Oh no, but also there are some times of the year where you can't go and harvest a mugwort plant because it's out of season and it's dead, or it's, you know, hibernating, or it's whatever, it's in the wrong lunar phase or whatever it may be. So you go and get it when you can, and you grab enough so that if you need it 6 months down the line, you've got some in your cabinet or whatever it is you may use. So that's kind of one of those things for me where a lot of people are like, no, you've got to start, okay, again, modern witchcraft, you've got to start everything from scratch every single time, because then you're putting all the, and it's got to be fine-tuned for this particular working. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. If I've got a working that's sat there, or a powder or a jar or something that is sat there that I know will create a very similar like result, do I need to reinvent the wheel? Can't I just take that thing that I've already done and add a bit of this to it, and that becomes something different? You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of times we get really caught up. I think a lot of times as practitioners, we get really caught up in this idea that, especially in the modern, I know you're not really part of Witch Talking the Instagram and all of that bollocks, but you do get kind of caught up that you've got to start everything from scratch. Every working has to be specific for that person, for that this, for that the other. And it's almost like I don't sit down to do a tarot reading and then go, hang on a second, give me 2 days to do your reading while I just sit here and hand draw my own design of a tarot deck for this one reading. You don't do that. So why would you do that in any other kind of practice? You know what I mean? I find that really weird. So Neil, right, I know down here it says this exclusive offer about a tarot reading, but this is part of this thing that I'm doing called 100 Days of Divination. And this is me, I guess, trying not to be a bone-eyed or lazy bitch. I mean, witch. It really is me trying to go, right, I remember when I was first learning tarot and I used to do a card of the day, write it down, and I used to do random spreads and all of this. And there's something about this idea of kind of just taking a fresh look back at things from a new perspective, I guess. And so for me, what I'm wanting to do with my 100 Days of Divination, it's starting on the 1st of March and it's going to run for literally 100 days. And the idea is I'm going to be doing some videos on YouTube where I'm going, oh, you want to learn tarot, this is what the magician means to me, or this is, you know, why I connect with the Empress so strongly. What these videos are going to be, and what this 100 days of divination is me literally going back for my own learning, but also to try and help other people along the way. And one of the things I'm wanting to do is also to look at runes and how runes connect in with tarot, and how that system works, and even look at things like astrology, which leaves me cold, but I'm going to try and see whether I can get my head around any of that, whether it is actually for me or whether it was just I had bad teachers in the past that didn't really inspire me. So mainly it's going to have a tarot focus, but it is going to be about other forms of divination as well. So what this essentially is me spending 100 days of going back and trying to relearn the tarot from scratch, looking at what some of those initial card meanings mean, how I got from, you know, I read a thing recently where the Empress was all about, you know, womanhood and motherliness and all of these things, and I was like, that's one aspect of it, but it's not what I connect really strongly with. So why is that? Why have I moved so far away from these meanings with all of the cards? Like, and then also, why does this deck bring me back to that connection and not the connection I have with different decks? So I'm going to be looking at all of that for 100 days. And this is the real challenge for me, because I've never, ever been able to do this or anything like this for that long. Like, I couldn't even do bloody, what was it called, Vlogmas. Like, I can't even do it for a month in the run up to Christmas. So 100 days, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it on the Instagram, which is up here, but also on YouTube. And I might even put some stuff on Facebook, because you know what I'm like. But as part of this long-winded thing, but anyway, as part of this, I've actually got a special offer running on Fiverr. So if anybody is wanting a tarot reading, if you go across to fiverr.com/Beyond Authentic, for everybody listening to this on the podcast, that's Fiverr with 2 R's.com/Beyond Authentic. The I in authentic is a numeral 1, a number 1. Then if you book a 6-card tarot reading and just type in the word weirdling, that will get you upgraded automatically to a 10-card reading, so you save a bit of money. But there is actually a little advert. Now, for all of you listening to this, it's just going to sound like some music. So yes, so if you're watching this, do feel free, literally it's right up until the 9th of June, which is 100 days. Do feel free to go and take advantage of that if you want. It is entirely up to you. But you can also join me on a Sunday evening right here on this channel on the YouTubes, and you can get yourself a free 3-card reading if you want to test my skills and abilities out. So that's essentially my bit of the plug for the episode. What about you, Neil? Because I know that like you've just done a new necro all about, I would say one of my favorite films, but it's actually one of the few horror films, like the first one, the rest of them, but the first one, it's one of the few horror films that genuinely puts the willies up me. I mean, you know, whatever. But I find it really scary. So tell everybody what see, even now I'm remembering the bloody film and the hairs on the back of my neck are going up. So then, what is your most recent issue of Necronomicon all about?
Issue 45 is all about the Exorcist films. So, you know, you got the first one, the second one, which is terrible. The third one, which is highly, highly underrated. The second one follows on from the first and it's terrible. But the third one is based on another William Peter Blatty book called Legion. And it's a detective story that's based in a hospital. And it's very removed from the actual story of The Exorcist. But it's kind of got these, you know, there's things linked to the first one in it. And it's absolutely terrifying, that film. Absolutely terrifying. And not enough people have seen it. Not enough people have seen it. I think I got put off after the second one. I think I got put off after the second one because the second one is not good. No. Third one is. I read the reviews. I read your review in the zine, and I was like, actually, maybe I'll give it a go then. Oh, it's fantastic. Not enough people have seen it. It's really, really underrated. But there's also they did like a prequel film which did really bad, so they remade it with all, the same actors and everything, and released that. So there's a whole comparison article about the two films as well. And then there's some other random straight to video 80s films in there as well, just to pad it
that's
out.
That's why we love Necro. It's not to pad it out. It's because that is the lifeblood of Necronomicon. Is all of those videos that you used to see, and I mean videos that you used to see in your video rental shop that wasn't a Blockbuster. It was always the off-brand Blockbuster, your local corner one, and they were always the ones that were like, you can rent this film for a whole month for just 50p. And those are the films that I used to love.
Yes.
Apart from Society. Society really messed me up. But yeah, like, bleh, horrible film. But like all of those sort of video nasties, that is what Necronomicon is absolutely all about. So if anybody wants to get a copy of Necronomicon, or if they want to go back and get some of the previous 45 issues, because wow, that's just incredible. I remember when you were first starting them, it's incredible that you're at 45. But if somebody wants any of those, Neil, how do they get their hands on a fresh, fabulous copy of the Necronomicon zine?
You can search Necro Neil on Etsy, or just put in Necronomicon fanzine into Etsy and you'll find them all there. There you go.
And if I've remembered to do it in editing, it will also be on the screen just down here somewhere. So yeah, do go and check it out, because I would say, like, however much we've talked about how lazy we are and how many shortcuts we take and all of that, I know how much of a labor of love Necro is for you, and how much it just is kind of taken over your life, isn't it? Like, you still make it in the exact same way. It's still copy and pasted and Pritt sticked, and I love it. I love the fact that it's never changed. I absolutely adore it. I mean, it has changed. It's got better. Your writing ability's got better. There's less typos, all of that, in all honesty. But I love the fact it's still Necro, and it's like you haven't gone Hollywood like Sam Raimi, like, you know what I mean? You didn't suddenly go, I know, I'll take the Spider-Man money. Like, you kept it, you've kept it honest, even though you can buy it now in New York in Forbidden Planet. Neil isn't going to say that, but I'm going to say that because I know a lot of you watching this or listening to this are actually in the United States. So if you do find yourself in Forbidden Planet in New York, pick up a copy there and then, or go and pick it up off Etsy. But that is pretty much it from us today. Neil, what is our topic of discussion, or our kind of loose thread, going to be for next month?
It's going to be divination. I think that'll tie in nicely with your 100 days of divination. I genuinely don't think I know anything about divination within chaos magic. Is there even? Oh, I guess we'll leave that for next month. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about divination in terms of from the chaos magic field. It's going to get interesting. Yeah, it's going to get interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. I can't wait for that. I learn things every single episode that we do this. Again, this month, I've got that moment to go and like cogitate and ruminate over. But that is going to be it from us. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, please go ahead and do the likey, commenting, subscribey, ding the belly things that are just up above Neil's head. If you are listening to this on Mixcloud or even on SoundCloud, do please go across to the YouTube channel. It is Beyond Authentic. The I in Authentic is a 1, and then you'll see the lovely video version of this. But that is it from us today. All that's left to do is to say, as always, stay you, stay safe, stay authentic, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.